What's up, guys? Ron from Ronald Law, and we have a very special video today. We're going to be doing a dual lawyer reacts with Seth Fuller of Trial Champions here. He's got a great YouTube channel, so check it out if you're interested in that. But in this video, we're going to be taking a little bit of a deep dive. I posted that last video on the Trump indictment and some of that consequence, and there's a lot of reaction. I felt pretty fair. There was a good amount of criticism, and so Seth is going to pick that up. He is a educated, informed attorney in his own right, and so Seth, go ahead. Tell me what we were just talking about in terms of the charges.
Okay. Yeah, first I want to kind of caveat it because I know what the comments are going to be. I'm really, it's weird to say, kind of anti-political. I hate politics. I can't stand any of this. That's probably why the only time this is interesting to me is how it gets political. I don't
With the
really,
criminal charges, you mean?
yeah, well, and with how they're treated differently than, say, if I was advising my client on what to do in this situation. Now, again, I'm a criminal attorney here in Texas, not in New York. So I only know real well the Texas laws, but just generally they're pretty identical across the board as far as things like this go. But so I want to caveat it with I don't consider myself Republican or Democrat. I am a registered Republican here in Texas for local purposes. I live in Denton, Texas, which is mostly conservative, and so if I want to have an effect on local elections, I kind of got to register as a Republican. So that's my little spiel to caveat it. But I am surprised. What I will say is, you were telling me there were some YouTubers who were saying this was a slam dunk, some personalities and lawyers who are saying this is a slam dunk, and that is very surprising to me. Looking through I didn't do YouTube too long. I kind of did an article search from lawyers who are reacting article. A lot of them are the same, but I got a lot of, even from the more liberal attorneys, which is like, this is going to be a hard road to hoe. Like, nobody is saying that I saw that this is a slam dunk as far as prosecuting these particular charges are. And you were mentioning,
Even though the underlying facts, I think nobody disagrees, right? And I try to
correct,
state that too. So for people that don't know, I think both sides are agreeing on the payments, the transfers from Trump's organization to Cohen. They were misappropriately or
absolutely.
incorrectly identified. So those were technically false business records. They were not legal expenses. They were a repayment. And so those underlying facts, that doesn't make it a slam dunk in terms of the underlying misdemeanor or not for the felony, or what makes it not a slam dunk?
I don't think it's a slam dunk for anything. So here's the issue I have. So I want to start with, do I think Trump violated the law? I said since the election, the first election, when this all came out, right, that I think Trump violated the law. Like, this is, to me, a clear violation of campaign finance stuff. All right. So in other words, what Cohen essentially pled guilty to, which is trying to affect the election by using campaign funds. And so that, I think, is against the law. That I read everywhere, and indeed, I think several people were successfully prosecuted for it. They took deals or whatnot, and that's a whole different thing. But
Right.
regardless, that's all federal stuff. I don't understand why this would be state stuff. And number two, when we talk about politics, why is this happening years later?
Well, I think
Like,
I'll have a good answer to that.
okay,
There's a statute for tolling, for the president. So for the sitting president, you can toll the statute of limitations until they're out of office.
and I understand why they might toll it until he's out of office. He's been out of office years now,
True, and
like
that
years
is
now.
a great point and counterpoint.
And
And
it just happens to be as part of the election. You know what I'm saying? So what?
well, and so which do you think is a bigger driver? Did a potential crime occur? Yes. Was this politically motivated? Absolutely. Yes. And the both of those statements can be true at the same time.
Absolutely. And so let's get to, well, I'm saying there a crime did happen. Why am I disputing that this is a slam dunk? Because I think there's going to be a problem with this trying to turn a state misdemeanor into a felony. You've already said that, and I think we can agree on that. That's There's no reason to do that. There's no good reason to do that. That is all politically motivated to me. Again, if my client came in and was like, "Hey, they're turning this," and I know it's almost impossible to separate the politics because they're using the campaign finance law to turn it from a misdemeanor to a felony,
Right. The
right?
underlying additional crime, right? That's one of the key elements of the New York statute to escalate it to a felony was that if the false business records were used in conjunction with another crime, and that's what they're stating is the other crime. But the beautiful thing of all of this, and credit to Bragg and the Democrat machine, they don't have to prove the allegations of the underlying crime. They just have to point to it as the underlying crime, but they don't need a conviction. They don't need any of that. And so it's a really neat trick. It's kind of like that felony murder thing. If you just claim it was in the commission of a felony, you can get the felony murder bump up or enhancement without proving it.
True, but I think you said something that is a little untrue, and I know what you meant, but they still have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that element of the crime to the jury. They don't have to prove it in the federal court. He doesn't have to be convicted of that crime federally. He doesn't have to be convicted of that crime separately. But
Okay.
in order for the jury to find that it's a felony level, that is an element of the crime. So they do have to prove it here in Manhattan
So,
court.
so that's a
Some would say
great
it's
point.
easier.
I really appreciate that, clarification and the nice way you corrected me to say, Ron, you're wrong. But how do they prove that? Because the elements of a full crime being committed versus just that the crime occurred, what's the standard? What are they going to be trying to prove to the jury?
What they're going to have to prove to the jury is he did commit this crime. And I think it again, unless New York is completely different, which I severely doubt, and reading attorneys from New York opine on this, they are going to essentially have to prove this case that he was doing it, that he was doing the federal case. They kind of got to do a double proof. And that's why it's
Wow.
not even close to a slam dunk.
Yeah,
I
so that's
really don't
that's an
believe.
incredibly complex and difficult. You have to prove all of those elements of the secondary underlying crime beyond a reasonable doubt. And what I think you're going to face, this is an absolute, you know, opportunity or case of jury nullification, right? You get one juror in there who says, I don't like the guy. I think he's bad. I think he abuses, his power. He's not a great guy. He's not nice, but I'm going to uphold my civic duty. And when this is politically motivated, he can hang that jury over and over and over again, relying on just, kind of this concern about political motivation. Would that be true?
Absolutely. Not only that, but we got to look at the reason that this isn't in federal court. Because I was expecting this in federal court the minute he stepped out of the office. But the reason this isn't in federal court is because they tried this with John Edwards, and in my opinion, a almost identical case.
Oh, give us some background. Give us some
So
background
as I
on that
recall, now
case.
again, I didn't go back and look at. I did go back and peruse through the indictment for John Edwards, but I didn't like concentrate on it. It's my understanding he had a love child with somebody else. He was running for president, and a rich donor donated a lot of money, I think several $100,000, and cut a check directly to the hush money source. And so it didn't go through his campaign finance, as I recall, but it was a donor who did it, and they caught it. And so that's even worse because he was charged with several counts of of not reporting that. It's very
Right.
similar to the Trump, though, in that they're saying it was a business expense that he didn't report. In John Edwards' case, they're saying it was a campaign contribution that they didn't report. And
Right.
we kind of have an opposite thing here with Trump, which is he ran it through his campaign, sort of, and then reported it as a business expense, right?
Right.
So, but that John Edwards, he was brought up on federal charges. They charged him, and he was found not guilty of the main charge of him doing campaign finance fraud, and then they hung on the other five
Wow.
counts, and then it was a mistrial, and he was never retried because they didn't feel they could prove it. And again, if I were to guess, politically, they didn't care because he was no longer a candidate for the presidency. Now, they could have done that here. There's no reason they couldn't have brought the same charges in Trump and hope for better results. And in fact, John Edwards didn't have somebody who had pled guilty to doing this for him. So my question is, why not? And my answer has to be the Department of Justice felt that the way Trump did it didn't match, because we're not talking about his Department of Justice, right? So I would say they didn't think it matched it was even less of an offense than what John Edwards did. That would be my
Okay.
guess.
So it's really moving down in terms of severity. And that's a point that I kind of raised in my video, is really this analogy of, okay, this is a low level offense or the fact pattern. If it happens to any other business owner, and I'm telling you, it's almost guaranteed it's happening right now. Millions and
Yes.
millions of business owners are misclassifying business records. They're keeping them in New York State unlawfully. They're getting deductions that are illegal. But if the government catches you, for first-time offenders, 99% of the time, it's going to be a civil remedy. They're going to say, disgorge the benefits. You maybe pay interest. You may pay penalties, but it's purely just a civil thing. They treat bookkeeping errors, false business records, I get it, they are false, as a civil thing. And then what happens if you do it again?
Well, I think they treat it, I really do think I don't even think they treat it as a civil thing in my estimation. They almost always treat it as a tax thing, and the federal government comes after you. Again, I've been doing this a long time. I've represented most of the gamut of criminal offenses that you could do here in the state of Texas. I've represented somebody on those, even some really strange ones. I have yet to come across anything like this where there wasn't some fraud involved. But what I mean by fraud is direct fraud of them saying they spent the
Yeah,
money on something else and
creating invoices out of scratch and not actually transferring the funds, that's fraud. I'm
yeah,
with you on there. Well, I think one difference maybe between New York State and Texas, though, is with New York State and city income tax, I think they have their own, they go after people with state tax reasons that Texas doesn't have as much. I mean, unless you're
fair
not paying
enough.
your franchise taxes. So
No, that's true. And so that's a really good point. Now you're being nice to me. That's a really good point. But what I would say is, yes, you're absolutely right. I think it would be, I think it would be a civil thing first. And I wouldn't call it civil. I think it would be a
administrative.
administrative.
It's a
Correct.
correction. It's administrative. You owe us a little bit of money, penalties, interest. That's fine. And if you do it again and you really are pissing off the taxing authorities and all these people, they may bring misdemeanor charges. And that's only
Yes.
after you really tick them off and you've had multiple warnings and they say, you guy, you're really not getting it. Stop doing this. We're going to charge you with a misdemeanor. And if you go through that whole thing and you get convicted, if you don't have a past criminal record of no fraud, no felonies in the past, you're a first-time offender, it's going to be probation. It's going to be 364 probation and same disgorgement, pay costs, pay attorney's fees, all that stuff. And only then, after all of that, if you still do it again, will the DA consider bringing a felony charge for bookkeeping errors.
Correct. Now, the wild thing about this, and the thing I do give credit to these YouTubers and personalities to be outraged and it's unbelievable that what we're talking about here, what we're actually talking about, is the president, and at the time a candidate, was frequenting hookers, didn't pay one off enough to begin with, then paid her off fully later, Everybody, this is not, I mean, as far as I know, this is not even contested. In fact, I think he is in his defense saying that this is what happened, that he didn't want Melania to know. And therefore he did make the payment, but that means that this did happen. But we're talking about all this of a presidential candidate at the time who won, and then one who got super close to winning again, and then one who, if you believe this is political, which is hard not to because of the misdemeanor felony part of it, is could win again.
Yeah, and for sure,
Crazy,
it's still
bananas.
early, but I would consider him one of front runners for the Republican nomination if he does a lot of things. But DeSantis, Trump, it's a
Yes,
short list of people at the top. So
that is crazy, and the fact that they have to bring charges and not just on the campaign trail
right.
say, look, here's what we have. Donald Trump frequented hookers. This is the only one that we know about, but there must be others.
Well, we know of a couple other ones. We know
Oh
the
yeah,
other.
well, this is the only one that we definitely know about that he's going to completely admit to as part of the defense
Right, right.
to his crimes. But regardless, he frequented hookers. This is the Republican Party that he's running for, family values and all that. It's just pretty crazy. Now, again, here's as political as I get, because I do believe the crazy part of this started with Bill Clinton. I really do feel that this is the origin of the whole thing. That they could
Is
say,
desensitized the American. It has normalized this type of behavior. And it's like politics. They take a good thing and they just abuse it until it becomes some grotesque mutation to the extremes.
yeah, they broke the golden rule before social media. They broke the golden rule of shut up and don't say nothing about these personal peccadillos, is what my favorite saying I heard recently. But these, things that a lot of these guys do, use hookers, are cheaters and philanderers and all that stuff that we know since back in JFK, right? But
I mean, I
this
think
was
you can
before
go
social
back
media.
further than that. It's
Oh,
not
well,
just a,
yeah.
you
No,
know,
every president ever.
human, everybody with power has that temptation. They have the opportunity. And so for sure, they have been indulging in this since the beginning of
Yeah.
any type of power. So, but I think, yeah, to your point, it has come into the conversation in a much more public and acceptable manner, such that both sides, say, okay, we all admit that this happened, but how can we slice it, and how can we take a moral superior angle to say that, well, we're better because we keep
Yes.
our dirty laundry tighter under wraps. That's
Cor-
the only difference.
Correct. But I think the difference nowadays is with social media, which we're taking full advantage of here. We have two perfect strangers who can talk live and go out to hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people, billions of people. And we know all this and we're spreading it out there to the public. And I think that creates it creates a problem in that when we were keeping it under wraps and not spreading it out, and it was just all rumor and in tabloids and all that stuff, there was some degree of blissful ignorance, not purposely not seeing this stuff. And now that it's out there, we kind of have to stop pretending we don't see it, but
Right.
instead of saying no, it matters now and we're not going to elect this person or they'll lose miserably, we kind of go, well, we do see it, but now it doesn't matter. And that's the problem.
Absolutely. And I think it definitely happened, in the last election cycle. A lot of things were out there and you had bad, I would say actors, but you had bad situations on both candidates, and it essentially just is a wash. I'm referring to like Hunter, right? So
Yeah.
Hunter frequents the hookers, he does the cocaine, he does all this stuff, but with all of Trump's bad things, voters just kind of say it's a wash, and they don't look at these are both horrible candidates. I mean, we have what's the South Park? We have douche and turd sandwich here.
Third
It's just,
sandwich,
but then people ignore it.
giant douche.
And it is a really powerful cognitive dissonance to be able to do that. And I say, the purpose of us talking here is because we're speaking from a very unique perspective. And I will say this, we don't have an agenda. I have no agenda that the mainstream media or a lot of the bigger channels, they have an agenda to push, and we're just here as regular people. And so I would ask anybody who's still listening now after, what is this, 15, 20 minutes, like it, drop a comment, subscribe if you want to support and see more of this, because I think you can really learn a lot about your own self by listening. Oh,
Uh-oh, gotta make movement. Your lights went out. No, I'll distract him by talking and he'll switch back on the Zoom. The crazy part is, so this is, and you can, there's plenty of people out there who are, I think Russell Peters. No, what's the other one? Russell Brand. Russell Brand is one of those who kind of
Jordan
takes
Peterson, I think, is the guy, the Canadian philosopher. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, him too. But I'm thinking Russell Brand. I don't know if you watch his stuff, but he kind of takes the center and is just where I am. Again, I'm not a giant fan of his or anything, but I do like that. I'm kind of in the same regard, which is like I take the middle. I don't think any of these people are good. I don't understand in a country of 300 million 300 million people, 300 plus million. I think it's 350 or something now. In a country of that many citizens, why in the world we have to rely on the better of two evils? That's the craziest thing. I mean, why don't we have the best of the best up there? And it will probably never be again, I guess. And I think to be fair, Trump is the one who did this. And by did this, I'm not passing judgment on him for doing this, because it was a winning strategy. But he came in and he said, look, we're all ignoring this stuff. We are all in cognitive dissonance. Now, instead of being in the old school cognitive dissonance of it's not happening, I'm just going to say it's happening and say that it is happening and put it in your face, and then say, but you want me to win anyways, so you're going to vote for me. And that was a whole new thing. Nobody knew how to take that. And I think and when it worked, I'm surprised that there hasn't been more adjustments here. But also, I think regardless, it's gross to bring the justice system into it, but it's all but that's politics. So I'm not like, oh, poor Trump. Poor Trump. What are we going to do? Like, that's what politics is. And he brought it in, and I think he's going to use this as a weapon, and it's probably going to get him more votes somehow, which is a crazy thing. But
well, that's part of my take on this was, if you are going to use criminal charges, and if you're going to come at Trump, social media free airtime king, you've got to come with something that's going to stick. Because if he gets a hung jury, or if he gets these dismissed or whatever, not guilty, that he is going to use that as rocket fuel to get to the next level. Look, Democrats in New York, they tried to come at me and they lost. They did not get a conviction, and anything short of a full conviction on 34 counts is going to be rocket fuel for Trump. And so it just seems so weak to bring these charges against him, that, to your point, you don't have to prove a whole second crime with a lot of complex, beyond a reasonable doubt. It doesn't seem like a good criminal case to bring against somebody that will benefit 1,000% if they lose.
yes, and so there's some people are like, well, there's lesser included. So they could find for the misdemeanor and not for the felony, which is a possibility. Fine. Again, I don't even know if that's the case. We all agree you cannot remove politics out of this. Yep. You can't.
And even in New York, I mean, even in New York, where they say they all hate him, what you're not realizing is, okay, 57% of New York voted for Trump. That's still 43% of the population. That is a huge, huge percentage. And again, even if you're in Manhattan, even if you're Brooklyn, there are so many people that span, race and gender and beliefs. that you don't expect, and then they turn out to be like hardcore Trump fans. And so some of those people are going to be on that jury, or at least, in the initial whatever you call it, the big Gen Pop one.
Yes, the voir dire,
Yes.
and the panel. And so here's what I'll say, because here's what people don't understand. There's going to be huge Trump supporters. There's going to be Trump haters.
Yep.
Lots of Trump haters. Lots of Trump haters. And everyone says, well, okay, well then that's good for if you're against Trump. That's more likely that he's going to get convicted. That is absolutely 100% not the case, because if they are a known Trump supporter, number one, they have a Facebook page most likely, and they've said it on Facebook. And so what happens is voir dire, the jury selection process, which I can't even imagine how many
How many?
panelists.
They're going to bring in 5,000 people. They're going to be like,
Yeah,
guys, no other trials this week, only the Trump impaneling or the,
yep. Which,
yeah,
believe it or not, I don't know if people know, this is kind of off. What people don't know is that in a capital murder case, it can take up to a month because they interview each particular juror by themselves. They call it a practice killer because it takes so long to pick a jury. You're doing up to 30 days for a death penalty case. You're doing up to 30 days of jury selection. And this is something we're talking about here, which is you're going to have to bring in thousands of people, and I don't even know how they do it. And they're going to have to pre-question them. And basically, in my opinion, if they've shown the voting, you can't get rid of them because of who they vote for. And
sure.
I'm interested to see in this particular case whether they can even be asked who they vote for. That's a really interesting question, but it doesn't matter. They're going to have Facebook. They're going to have
Twitter.
everyone is going to be
Yeah.
searched by the defense team. That's going to be, I guarantee you, they're going to have people in the defense going through that voir dire list. We already do it. As long as you don't friend them, you can look at whatever is public on Facebook.
Yeah.
And every single potential juror member, if they say something bad about Trump, they're out.
Right.
If they
Right,
say
right.
something good about Trump, like really good about Trump, they're out. And that's going to eliminate so many people that have a bias. So you're going to be left with people we hope as
People like you, people
yeah,
the intentionally and very consciously agnostic slice, very thin slice of the population
correct.
who's going to say, I don't care about politics. I'm just here to do my civic duty. I don't love it. And that person is probably going to be, respectful of the innocent until proven guilty and beyond a reasonable doubt standard, which probably plays into, what we say makes a difficult case if you get those people.
Not only that, but you also could, and I'm just saying could, end up with people who just aren't on social media, who will then say they're not very political, because we get liars in the jury panels, there's no doubt, who are like, nah, I'm not that, I don't care too much about it. But in their mind, they're like, if this person molested this child, I'm going to make sure they get the death penalty.
Right.
But I'm saying, how many people are not going to be on social media? Here's what I'll say. If I were to guess how many people who are more liberal leaning and how many people are more conservative leaning are off social media, I would go conservative leaning by far. And specifically, they're in Manhattan. You're talking about a huge conservative Jewish community and a conservative Christian community that don't get on social media because they think it's evil, because they think it's bad, because of this sort of thing.
Well, they're not wrong. They're not wrong.
That's right. They're absolutely right. But what I'm
It's
saying
going to skew older as well,
yep,
and that's all with all juries in general. They tend to be the
yes,
older population.
very
And
old.
if you look at the average Trump supporter of the older demographic, I think his supporters are older than the younger, more progressive, side. And so already you're shaping out this jury hypothetical profile that is already moving, because if you don't have those written statements or tweets or things, you can't do it. Even if you say he looks like he loves Trump, you're like,
Yeah,
doesn't matter. There's no
doesn't
evidence.
matter.
So a little bit, do they have the preemptory strikes? I mean, it's
Yes,
unlimited for cause, but then do they still get a couple that are?
yes, and that's interesting because so here in Texas, for a jury of 12, it's 10 strikes each. So I just pick I do voir dire for other attorneys on regular occasion, and I pick my own juries. So I just did a aggravated kidnapping. Was nothing big, not that big of a deal. Nobody was really badly hurt or killed. And it's 60 people to start with. Okay, so that's 60 people. And then I get 10, they get 10 in cause. We got to 47 people. We pretty much could have been eliminated. So that means we were 13 people from busting the panel. That means we don't have enough people after cause strikes and preemptory strikes, or we won't have enough people left. And so then you call bust the panel, and it's a mistrial, and you
Because what do you
start
need? You
over.
need 12 plus reserves.
12, yeah, sorry, 12. And we had a reserve in this one, but we didn't need a reserve. It wasn't 60 because of the reserve.
Okay.
And if we didn't get a reserve, we probably would have continued with just the ones we could pick. So that didn't necessarily bust the panel, but that's 12
Gotcha.
people. With 6 people, which is generally misdemeanor, but let's say it's going to be felony, I understand. In New York, it's going to be 12. So
Okay.
I didn't look it up. You could look it up, but let's say it's 10, just like here in Texas, 10 preemptory strikes. That's crazy when you have like, again, they're gonna have to take a whole thing and start. I would guess that they're gonna start with several hundred people.
Yeah.
That's would be my guess. And they
Yeah.
might do it special where they do it sort of like they can rotate them in. They might do something like that.
Okay.
But my guess, here's my guess. They're gonna undervalue that, undercount that, underestimate that, I should say. They're going to underestimate that first, and they're going to bust that panel. That's my guess. So we're going to see, and maybe on purpose, maybe this is to drag this thing out.
Well,
But
yeah.
I
So
think,
let's kind of wrap it up now.
yeah.
So what do you think is probably the likely happen? Is this gonna go to trial? I mean, is there any settlement that could ever happen for both sides? And is this gonna drag out until November of 2024?
So I go two ways. Two ways I think will happen. Trump hardlines it and just drags it out. That's not hard. It's really not hard at all.
Does dragging it
Um,
out benefit him if he's a candidate with this case looming?
I mean, I would say that. I don't know if you've heard what he said before while he was running for office. I would think those things would not benefit him as a candidate. Didn't seem to matter. Yes, I do think this benefits. I'm just going to tell you, I think this benefits him as a candidate because this is a Manhattan, New York court and jurisdiction. All of his fans are already fans. There's no doubt.
Right.
And this galvanizes them. There's no doubt. That's
That's
what they're
true. true.
doing. I think he loves this. I think he's happy. That's me.
Really? Really?
Absolutely.
So he's
Absolutely.
happy with this particular charge and the way that they did it,
Yes.
all
Yes,
of those
absolutely.
subjects. He's like,
I think he wanted them to overreach.
look at his press time.
Yes.
Yeah. So minor sidetrack, but like my wife and I, we watched the session. And Connor, the son, he's running for president. He's like, oh, I want to do another little ad spend, just so I keep my name up there. Think about spending $100 million on a national ad buy. And she's like, oh my gosh. Instead, could we just throw a crazy wedding and get in the publicity, get free media? Because that would save me $100 million. And that's what Trump's thinking. He's like,
Yes.
boom, I live rent free in your minds, in your websites and Twitter and YouTube for free, all of it.
Yes.
So
Yes, and again, the fact that they didn't do a misdemeanor and did a felony is even better. So I think it goes, he fights it and keeps it dragging out until he wins or loses the election. This second thing, and I think this could happen no matter what, is that at some point he takes a misdemeanor charge of two
oh
of the counts,
oh
gets on probation. What does he care? You know what I'm saying? They're not going to violate him on probation. Gets on probation and does his probation at some point. Again,
yeah, it sounds weird because he can spin it where he's magnanimous. He's like, okay, you know what, guys, we agree, I did something wrong. I just
yeah,
want to move on from this. I will give you this. And when he spins it as, I will decide, to give you this plea because you guys have had this case for 14 months and you can't get your act together. If you can't convict
yeah.
me in 14 months, I'm too busy for this. I will just give you this plea.
But again, as long as I don't see a reason he can't drag it out. I really
Yep.
don't.
Yep.
Again, that judge is going to be the one who decides whether he can drag it out or not. But I think even if he doesn't, so it's a double-edged sword. I don't think he pleads before the election.
Gotcha.
Um,
Gotcha.
so if he doesn't plead before the election, are we going to have a trial before the election? What you just said, free publicity. And if they bust that panel the first time, more free publicity. I can't even get a fair trial here in New York City. And he's setting it up for even if he catches some lesser
Appeal. You
included.
throw it up on appeal. Yeah.
I think there's many appellate issues in regards to whether the federal law can be used in the state court. I don't know that they do that ever, but it doesn't matter. No matter what happens, he has an appeal. And number two, forget the appeal. His base is going to think that this is an injustice, and they're going to think it's just the liberal Democrat machine and a bunch of jurors who hid their. I guarantee you, no matter what happens, we're going to hear about all the jurors with their hidden predilections. You know what I'm saying? Oh my God, look, she voted against Trump in 1998, or whatever. And so,
yeah, it's crazy how much I think, because we have media of the jurors, we don't know their names as the John Q public, but facial recognition. You're going to be able to take a picture, plug it into Facebook, and guess with a pretty high probability that this is that person. You look up, she lives in Queens, she's 70 years old, she looks like that. And then you're going to pull all this social media once you have a name and an address, and the amount of released, but it's nobody's fault. But what are you going to do? You can't put the jurors in a hood. There's tremendous public interest value in showing the jurors as they're entering the courtroom or doing all this stuff.
Now, again, here's where I get to, which is strategy, and where Trump, I think, won all this, and where he could again, which is, what was the strategy here? If you're thinking that by having this trial and then even saying getting a conviction, I guess if you get a felony conviction, maybe he can't run anymore, right? That's what I understand. So, but to chance that and give this man more time. Again, you should already know there's not a human being alive in America who doesn't know that this is going to give him more popularity. He's going to use that to power his base and to get more people on his side. It's already happening. It happened within 3 seconds of them even announcing the indictments, all of that stuff. If you don't believe that, then what is the takeaway from this? Did you really think you can get him in court and prosecuted in time for the election? I don't think that's reasonable or feasible. And so why are you doing this? Why? Because Trump paid off a hooker. That's, again, like you said, there's no doubt this is political. If they are considering something else, if Trump isn't running for office, if this timing doesn't work out the way it does. And so to me, I'm not saying don't prosecute Trump. I'm saying to do it in this way is reckless and stupid. That's my opinion.
Yeah. I think it's 2020 all over again in terms of what the composition of American voters is feeling. Nobody who voted for Trump in 2020 is now not going to vote for him. And there's a certain percentage of people that voted for Biden the first time and now are regretting that or second guessing that. We're going to sit it out. And that's probably what they're thinking is, hey, we were very close, by a razor margin, and the facts as they have occurred, I won't lay blame, but haven't helped the current president. And so
and why are we doing it? Here's what I'm saying. The American voter, if this is political, which I think nobody says it's not, the American voter already knows he did this.
Yeah.
There's like no doubt. There's why? Yeah. It's not, oh my God. It's not like they came out with this secret indictment where then they released it and it's like, wait, he did what? He killed a prostitute last year? Like I get that. But when you're
and they're bringing charges in Louisiana, like, oh my gosh, that would turn a lot of people against him, saying like he crossed the line, and even a hardcore state that loves him is bringing charges because they feel a moral obligation. They feel compelled. They can't sleep at night if they don't do it. That's what charges in Louisiana would have done, or Florida.
And more importantly, what the last thing that doesn't make sense to me is everyone who I see in the news is like, well, he's done far worse than this since. And that's what I'm getting at is like, you brought up an old thing that we already absolutely knew about.
Yep.
And then you're now ignoring why haven't you prosecuted him for the things that the Democratic talking heads have been saying he's done that is criminal. January 6th, all of these things that they're
Yeah.
saying. That's what I don't understand. It's just when these people put these things through the positives and negatives and come out with, yeah, let's do it. It's bananas to me.
Well, I'll say that, they're smart. They're smart people who understand a lot of things, and no, they're in a position of power. This whole action makes sense if you are operating from a position of fear. They
Yes.
do not have confidence that, the midterms and everything that's happening, and DeSantis and Florida, all this stuff. They do not have confidence if Trump and DeSantis, support each other or something, come together for one or the other, and that base is energized. That's what they're scared of. And so they're taking risk, higher risk than is needed to try to get a moonshot. They're swinging for the fences because they are operating from fear.
Also,
Yeah.
the New York DA might not care about the presidential election. That just might
I
be
mean,
it.
so he's a politician, right? To be the
Yes.
DA, he's 100% gunning for politics. I think that's also a useful lens, because if he doesn't care about Democrats, if he doesn't care about the presidential, if he only cares about one person, Alvin Bragg, this is working for him, which
Absolutely.
he is getting press time, and we are saying his name because of this. And so if you also, that I think that also makes logic. If he is doing it for his own personal interests, then it makes sense, right? And if
Unless he
he's
loses. Unless he completely loses. And then
uh,
he's known. I don't think it, I really do believe this. If he loses, if he makes his shot and doesn't make it, I think it's devastating, because there's nobody who's going to be happy with him. I promise you, people aren't advanced enough to say, well, at least he's the one who prosecuted Trump.
yeah,
Here's
he
what I'm telling
stood
you.
up. He stood
If
up to the
he
orange man.
Yeah, but if he loses the case and Trump gets elected, there is zero chance this man gets elected as DA again. That's what I would guess.
Well, but from his perspective, again, go big or go home.
That's
This is
right.
his shot
Yep.
to elevate. If his goal is national spotlight, this is his only chance to get into the conversation. And if he falls out, he's back where he started. He's a
It,
Harvard law grad. He can
I
get
was
a
about to
job.
say, it don't matter. He's still going to be a politician. That's the crazy thing. He could be
That's
a
right.
lobbyist. He could be whatever. The system's so crooked that it's just like, okay, who cares? He loses DA. It's not like he
Yeah,
can't run for anything
no
else.
repercussions if you know how to spin it. And if you
Yeah.
if you want to be a politician, yeah, exactly. He loses the case to Trump, he can go commiserate with fellow people that will, oh yeah, it's Trump's fault. Oh yeah, those voters are so stupid, or oh, the jury was so dumb. You know,
Yes. And
um,
I'd like to make my pitch to everyone listening here. I'm just going to tell you, I'm sorry we're talking about this, but I'm a lawyer and this is a legal thing. There's so much more important things to be talking about. I promise you this will be the last time I talk about this on camera. There's so much more important things to be talking about. Don't let them distract you with this stuff. I think it has to be addressed. We have to come on here and say, here's what we think. Here's what we think is political. We can't just sit there and bury our heads in the sand. I think that's how you get to this point. But at the same time, now that it's been said, now that all these things, once the minute we say this is all political and here's our good reasons is why we think it's political and here's why we think he could win or lose, and that's it. After that, you have to move on and you have to say there's much more important things. If you feel that voting works, then go out and vote for Trump if you like him and against Trump if you don't. And then, but keep your eye on what they're doing, which is playing games with y'all when none of these people are going to lose out. What did we just say? This DA, he's not going to lose out. The Democrat machine, none of those people are going to lose out from this. Maybe Biden will lose. Next year, there'll be a contender again. Trump, he's not going to lose out. Maybe he'll lose again. He's still going to be at least a millionaire. He's still going to be in the public eye. He's still going to be there. He's not going to lose out. If he wins, it's going to be, it's just nobody is losing out here except for us, the voter. If you believe that these are the wrong people in charge, then the citizens are the ones who are losing out. So
All right. Well, if you want Seth back on this channel, drop a comment and say, don't go away. Do one more video for us. But again, really appreciate it. It was
anything.
great chatting with you today.
It was very nice trying to, I'm glad we could get together. People don't know we're both from the Dallas area, right? And so I saw your video on Afro Man. It destroyed my video on Afro Man that I actually got one thing wrong, so wrong that I deleted it. But if you don't know, if you're on my channel, I'm going to edit this and drop a version on my channel, and go follow Ronald Rohde, right?
Yeah.
All right. Spell that for him.
RONROHDE law. Yeah.
All right. And what kind of law do you generally practice?
I do real estate investing.
All
So
right.
secure your own future, be your own boss, and don't
So
worry about the government.
go check him out. But his Afro Man video was awesome. It killed it. And so I said, man, I gotta hook up with this guy. And I appreciate you having me on, man, and talking about this thing. Anytime you want to talk, anytime you want to do it. And everyone go check him out. Subscribe to both our channels. Do all that stuff, because we just do that for fun. We got regular daytime jobs. It's Good Friday. Happy Good Friday and Passover and everything for everybody. Easter, everything, whatever you celebrate. But thanks for having me on, man.
All right. See you, Seth.
All right, brother. Take it easy.